The French have been gradually rolling out their shiny new EBRC Jaguar. It's a 6x6 armored reconnaissance vehicle that is replacing the 4-decade-old AMX-10RC. Today, I'm talking about the new Jaguar Platoon structure and equipment to include drone integration, the unit's role, and how it compares to the old AMX-10 RCR. In terms of firepower, Jaguars are armed with a 40mm cased telescoped autocannon, a Mag 58 7.62 machine gun, and 4 Acheron anti-tank guided missiles, 2 ready to fire and 2 reloads. This compares to the AMX-10 RCR with its unstabilized 105mm gun, which doctrinally was not considered adequate to combat tanks. The Acheron is capable of hitting targets out to 4,000 meters, and has fire and forget and lock-on after launch capabilities. That means they can fire and skedaddle, or the gunner can make interventions after launching to retarget, abort, or lock on to a target that wasn't visible when firing. Wheeled cannons are doctrinally the same as the Leclerc main battle tanks in terms of mission, but their technical characteristics means they have different strengths and limitations. Both types of units are capable of conducting reconnaissance and security operations, close combat by fire and maneuver, rapid redeployment to intervene on another unit's behalf, close infantry support, zone control, and convoy escort operations. While Jaguar units are capable of combat, they'll naturally be more weighted towards the intelligence gathering side of recon and security, while Leclerc units are more capable of blocking or destroying the enemy's forward elements during security operations. The better you can destroy and not be destroyed, the safer the supported unit is. In close combat, the Leclerc is naturally more suited to attacks in force, meaning fire-dominant attacks against the enemy's main force. Wheeled cannon units are maneuver dominant, using mobility to find and attack weakness. In the past, wheeled units had to be paired with ATGMs or tanks to adequately counter enemy tanks, but now that Jaguars have their own ATGMs, maybe that's less necessary. Leclercs are still more tactically mobile off-road though, and doctrinally preferable in compartmentalized terrain where there may be no choice but to take a hit. Historically, wheeled units have been more deployable when the enemy doesn't have tanks. The French deployed Leclercs to Kosovo and Lebanon because the deterred country had a lot of tanks, but otherwise, the AMX-10RC, ERC-90, and VBLs got a lot more action. In terms of infantry support, the Jaguar and Leclerc will fulfill the same role, their task forcing with infantry as principal maneuver elements. As for how that's done, the squadron is really the core of it all, the building block for most deployments. Wheeled cannon squadrons currently consist of a command and logistics platoon, or PCL, and 4 armored platoons. In the legacy AMX-10RC squadron, each platoon consists of 3 AMX-10s in an armored group, 3 VBL scout cars in an investigation group, 2 with 7.62 machine guns and 1 with a 50 cal, and a relief truck, kind of the platoon's personal link to the company trains. It has an M2 50 cal that can either be mounted on a ring mount on the truck or dismounted on a tripod. Since the Cavalerie 2016 reforms, these platoons have been doctrinally manned at 4 crew per AMX, a commander, gunner, loader, and driver, 3 crew per VBL, a commander, driver, and crew member, and 2 personnel on the relief truck. Before that reform, these platoons were actually undermanned, only 20 personnel instead of 23, so they doctrinally have to be reinforced with temporary personnel to man the VBLs and truck properly. The new Jaguar platoon makes a slight departure from the old way, aligning it more with the current Leclerc tank platoon structure. They increased the number of combat vehicles and VBLs from 3 to 4. Because the Jaguar is only crewed by 3 personnel instead of 4, the increase in Jaguars is manpower neutral, but the extra VBL does require boosting the platoon by 3 personnel, made possible by the recent unit inactivations. Platoons are led by a lieutenant or a type of senior NCO called an adjutant. This is generally translated as a warrant officer, but not in the sense of an American warrant officer, which is a separate class of personnel. More like Commonwealth warrant officers who fulfill first sergeant and sergeant major type roles. They're assisted by a senior NCO, ideally a chief sergeant called a Marshal de Logis chef, who leads one of the 2 Jaguar patrols. The wingman Jags are intended to be commanded by a Marshal de Logis equivalent to a sergeant. The VBLs, meanwhile, are split into 2 patrols, ideally led by a sergeant. An experienced junior enlisted cavalier leads the wingman VBLs. In the cavalry, a brigadier chef first class and brigadier chef are equivalent to a chief corporal first class and chief corporal respectively. The VBLs are armed with either a MAG 7.62 machine gun mounted over the front passenger seat or a 50 cal machine gun in a larger rear-mounted turret. Personal weapons-wise, Jaguar crews are armed with Glock 17 pistols and ideally the carbine-length variant of the HK-416. VBL commanders and crew members are also armed with pistols, while the driver has a new HK-269 grenade launcher. In VBLs with the 50 cal, everyone would get the HK-416, but in the 7.62 VBLs, the third crew member gets a SCAR HPR marksman rifle, formerly designated the FPSA. They also have AT-4CS anti-tank weapons on standby. But perhaps more interesting is their idealized drone plan. The doctrine that's been communicated to me calls for 2 NX-70 quadcopters and 2 Black Hornet 3 microdrones per platoon. They'd be manned by the VBL crews under the direction of their car commander. Both are capable of day-night surveillance with approximate ranges of 3 and 1.6 kilometers respectively. It's a truism that making contact with the enemy using the fewest humans possible best allows units to retain their freedom of maneuver, the element of surprise, and limit risk to personnel. Making contact with UAS first has been the ideal for over a decade, even before the proliferation of commercial drones we have today. It'll allow the Jaguar platoon to make contact with the enemy sooner and further away from friendly forces, giving themselves and the supported commander more time and space to react. It also gives a bit of depth to observation as the drones can see beyond the line of contact from directly overhead. Platoons will have more options to direct fires onto the enemy before ever making contact on the ground. Not just artillery and conventional air power, but one-way attack drones that could be introduced in the future. The NX-70 is particularly interesting because the French are testing an integration with the Acron ATGM. In theory, the missile can fire without a visual, while the drone feeds the firing post coordinates of a concealed target, enabling a lock-on after launch and limiting exposure of the shooter to enemy fire. I don't know how wide the proliferation of drones is so far, but French cav regiments have been posting pictures and video of them for years now. 4 drones for every platoon seems a little bit much for early fielding, but they're definitely available to some degree. Briefly touching on task organizations, the platoon can be structured in different ways to accomplish different missions. The French call these articulations. In general, the more grouped together a platoon is, the easier it is to control and centralize combat power, making it more capable on the offensive or during security operations that require delaying, blocking, or destroying the enemy. But a more decentralized platoon allows for more reconnaissance objectives to be completed over a wider area and stealthier, but this results in a dilution of combat power. The VBLs are also less capable of covering a Jaguar as Overwatch, and single Jaguars are going to be less capable of buying time for the protected unit. At the same time, it might be necessary to do so if the platoon is tasked with supporting multiple infantry platoons or fighting in urban terrain, which naturally turns large fights into small unit actions. The tactical subunit below the platoon is called a patrol. The most basic would be 1 patrol with 4 Jaguars, probably still firing and moving in pairs, and 1 patrol with all the VBLs, unmixed, staying in her lane, all the firepower in one place to fight the enemy, and the scouts retaining their stealth for surveillance or a moving screen. The next level of mixing would be 2 patrols of 2 Jaguars and 2 VBLs each. This still provides pretty hefty subunits, but in 2 packages equally capable of conducting reconnaissance or fighting with a little more situational awareness. The most decentralized it can get while remaining practical would be 4 patrols of 1 Jaguar and 1 VBL each. Everyone still has a wingman, but it's the hardest combination to control, and the firepower is dispersed. A combination of these 2 task orgs is also possible. Now, while cav squadrons consist of 4 maneuver platoons on paper, France basically never deploys a squadron like this. They take the form of a task force called a Combined Arms Tactical Subgroup, or SGTIA, equivalent to a company team in American Asian or a company group in Britanese. For a cavalry-dominant task force, the absolute minimum would be the command and logistics platoon from the Jaguar squadron acting as the command post and first combat trains. At least 2 Jaguar platoons and an infantry platoon. They could have another Jaguar or infantry platoon, and necessary support like an engineer platoon from an engineer regiment, and an observation and coordination element from an artillery regiment. 1 or 2 complementary supporting units, stuff that isn't necessary in all cases, can also be tasked in support. For an infantry-dominant task force, you basically flip the script, with Jaguars fewer in number and in support. The same thing can be accomplished to form a recon and intervention SGTIA, just with the base being a recon squadron reinforced with a Jaguar and infantry platoon. A battalion-sized task force called a GTIA will normally consist of 3 or 4 SGTIAs. To put this all into an army context, France's armored cavalry force consists of 3 Leclerc tank regiments, the combined arms 5th Dragoons, and 7 wheeled cannon regiments. There's also the 2nd Hussar Regiment, which is a more stealthy, deep recon and infiltration unit, and a couple of small overseas regiments that are out of scope for this discussion. The wheeled cannon regiments are largely equipped with AMX-10 RCRs, although the Jaguar's been fielded to the regiments in squadron increments. Based on social media posts, it seems every regiment in the multi-role brigades has taken delivery of some amount of Jaguar, while the 1st Parachute Hussars and 4th Chasseurs under the light brigades have not yet. But regardless of platform, as part of a 2016 reorganization, the Cav Regiment consisted of 1 command and logistics squadron, 3 combat squadrons with the armor, 2 reconnaissance and intervention squadrons or ARES, and 1 or 2 reserve squadrons that I'll expand on shortly. At full strength, this regiment was about 697 personnel, excluding reservists. The ARES are lighter reconnaissance formations with limited anti-tank missile capability mounted on VBL scout cars. They gained 2 of them in an effort to strengthen the army after a string of Islamist attacks in the mid-2010s. However, in the 2020s, the 1st Spahis, Marine Infantry Tanks, 3rd Hussars, and 501st Combat Tank Regiment lost their 2nd ARE. But with the exception of the Franco-German Brigade, 1 regiment per brigade retained the 2nd ARE to work for the brigade as the core of a Contact Intelligence Subgroup, or SGRC, their idea for a future brigade-level reconnaissance task force. Regiments also generally have 1 or 2 reserve squadrons called Reserve Intervention Units, or UIRs. Traditionally, these have just been for internal security patrols in France, and weren't really specialized in a warfighting function. They're sometimes called mounted or portée squadrons, which is French cavalry speak for infantry organic to a cav regiment. However, in recent years, there's been a push to specialize some of those squadrons. The 501st, Marine Infantry Tanks, and 3rd Hussars, which all lost their 2nd ARE, have formed Reserve Armored Squadrons or EBRs with armored recon capabilities. Although at this stage, they seem to be more practical for providing patrol-sized reinforcements to the active duty squadrons for deployments, as opposed to generating a standalone squadron. Learn more about the French Army's maneuver reforms with this video on their Infantry Regiment 2030 concept, and if you like my stuff, consider supporting me on Patreon so I can keep making it. I'll see you in the next one.